Hi there, I'm Lois Prettyman. I am an artist, full-time artist. I'm a mixed media artist, but I've been primarily considering myself a silk painter for the last 4 years. I've been an artist full-time for the last 8 years. I retired from my job as a med tech, and then I started I worked in several different medias, ceramic, lampworking, and I got turned on to silk painting about 4 years ago when I took a class at the Craft Alliance on Del Mar in the U City Loop in St. Louis, and it was the only silk painting class I've seen. It's actually silk dyeing, and I took it with the instructors, and the instructor's name was Carla Tutkin. I've been looking for silk painting classes all over the place since then, and I don't even find a chapter of Silk Painters International. I found a chapter of Silk Painters International in Topeka, Kansas, and I took a trip out there with my husband in my RV and learned how to paint with Pro Print paste with a master silk painter by the name of Diane Lawrence. I have been taking classes online. I have been watching a lot of YouTube videos of silk painters that share their techniques. Silk painters tend to be generally, I would say, a little bit isolated because not a lot of people do it. And so they all have their techniques and little tricks and stuff like that they've learned, as well as I have too. So I'm going to share with you what I have learned about silk painting and maybe give you a little bit better appreciation for what's involved in the act of silk painting. I've entered a lot of stuff on my blog, and my blog is www.professionalgypsy.blog, and you can see examples of my art and other types of videos about goings on in Frenchtown and some of the galleries that I'm at, like Art Meets Vintage. This is my studio in my house. We have a historic house here in Frenchtown. And I'm kind of cramped for space as far as my stuff has a tendency to take over. So I will not apologize for the state of my studio because this is how it looks normally. Usually I set things up for a project and I do 1 or 2 similar projects, and then I disassemble everything, clean everything, and start over again with the next project. I'm going to let you see how my studio looks. So this is my studio. It's a great craft room. It's got lots of storage space, and this was initially added as part of the improvements by the previous owners of this house. I was using the studio space downstairs in the basement to do silk painting, but Joe's got some projects that he's doing down there, so I'm trying to move up here. I've got a drop cloth to catch the dye, but this is my PVC setup, and it's really something that Joe devised for me. It's adjustable depending on the size of what I'm doing. Initially I started doing scarves, and that worked really well, but then I started doing wall hangings, and then he had to add these larger legs and so forth. So this is set up for ponchos and wall hangings at this point. It takes me about an hour to get it set up and all duct tape so it doesn't come apart. But once I do that, then I can work on several projects, one right after the other, and then take it down. What I use for pins, a lot of people use straight pins, but I found from an artist who uses these Chinese suspension clips. My feeling is these are absolutely marvelous for silk painters. And if you can see this Chinese suspension clip, it's got 3 very, very sharp prongs, so you don't want to walk too closely to the stretcher system if it's empty, because these will snag on your clothes, and they'll even snag the silk if you yank on them. But if you just press them into the silk and use them to stretch the silk, they don't leave any marks, and they're wonderful for it. So you just don't want to step on those things because they hurt on bare feet. They really do. So this is my stretcher system. I've got my sewing machine set up over there in the corner when I do my quilting and stuff like that. You can see there's a quilt that I'm working on there. got my computer set up, I have this little cart system where I keep my dyes and resists that are colored, my water, my brushes, etc. I don't spend a lot of money on brushes. I don't have like a fancy squirrel hair brush or anything like that costs $80, because I just can't stomach the idea of spending that much money on a brush. So I use these, you can get them at Michael's. They're fabric painting paint brushes, and they come in a package. And I really like them. I think they work really well for it. I mean, like I said, I don't want to spend $80 on this one squirrel hair brush. That's, I've got this old acrylic that works really well for the big spaces and everything like that. It holds a little bit of dye, but it actually gives quite a bit of coverage. And my resists, currently I use Resistad water-based Gouda, and I use this commercial water-based resist that I get all my stuff from Dharma. Somebody said it was Elmer's glue, and I haven't really chemically compared this with Elmer's glue, but it smells like Elmer's glue. And when it dries like very glue-like. It's very hard, plasticky, but once you steam it and wash it and rinse it, I'm trying to explain to you what it means to have a resist and how it affects the hand of the silk. This has kind of been an ongoing thing for me as far as experimentation, because resists really aren't perfect. I have not really found a perfect resist. Initially when I started, there was this jacquard kind of clear resist that was kind of gooey, and it was just really gross to work with. And it really didn't do what I wanted it to do. But with the Resistad, this one was done with Resistad. The Resistad is a water-based resist, and it has a beautiful line to it. You can mix it with the dye, so you get colored lines here. And so this one was done with the Resistad. And initially the Resistad doesn't have the issues that the new water-based resist does. But it's still kind of plasticky, sort of. I think he uses gum arabic or something in it. But initially when you put it on, and this silk was a poncho that I did, and I have steam fixed it, and washed it. And then you can see how this line here of the resist that I've applied to the entire fabric doesn't affect the drape of the fabric. It's not gummy like paint, or it's not plasticky like paint. It's just part of the silk. It's dyed into the silk. And then for some of these items, like this particular item, I use the new water-based resist. The new water-based resist actually works well for white lines, because if you paint dye over the resist line, the resist doesn't take up the dye once the resist is down. And when the resist dries on this, it really is like Elmer's glue. It's like you just glued a whole bunch of stuff onto your fabric. So once you fix it in the steamer and pull it off, usually I use like tracing paper or something like that to meet up with the lines, the resist lines. And so when you pull the tracing paper off, it kind of takes some of that with. But once you wash it and rinse it and rinse all that stuff out and scrub, kind of scrub it a little bit, all that stuff comes right off, and you can tell it doesn't affect the way the piece drapes, because it's not paint, it's dye. So this is a wall hanging I did, and it's one of my first wall hangings, but at that time I was using Gouda, which is a latex based product for silk painting with the Surdy method. And the Gouda lines look beautiful. It works wonderfully for a wall hanging. I would not want to use Gouda on my scarves because some people have latex allergies. Especially chemo patients tend to be very sensitive to all kinds of chemicals. And so I don't use it on my scarves, but it works wonderfully for wall hanging because you don't really care about how the wall hanging drapes. You just want that luxurious look of the silk with the finished product. So here's my silk. And normally when I buy silk, it depends on the project that I'm doing. If I want to do a silk scarf in specific sizes, usually I will order silk blanks from Dharma Trading Company. They usually have the best quality. I've bought some silk blanks at certain stores, art stores and stuff like that. They tend to be very, very, very thin in terms of thickness, and so sometimes they fray and so forth because I tend to be a harsh painter at times. I tend to get crazy with the brush. For my ponchos, for the last like 6 or 8 ponchos that I showed you, I actually ordered what Judy Stinton had left over from the silk blanks that she sold. I do believe she might be getting out of the business, I don't know, but for instance, they come packaged like this. So this is a $30 Angel Wings oval cape that it's a silk blank, so it's silk fabric, and you can see how she's already serged the fabric. I believe she uses silk thread to serge the fabric as well. So when you dye the fabric, you're also dyeing the serged parts of it, and so it looks like one beautifully seamless poncho. She charged me $30 for this. I think some of her other ponchos and Rowanas are a little bit more expensive. But when I buy the silk blanks, either the ponchos or the scarves that I get from Dharma, they're already hemmed. So they're either hand rolled or serged or machine done. It really kind of depends on you, what you like. In the beginning, I got silk blanks and they were machine hemmed because I thought the machine hem looks good. But I have noticed that it does affect the drape a little bit. So this particular piece of silk is Habitai silk. And Habitai is also known as China silk. I think it's what most people think of as silk. The thickness of silk is measured in mummies, M-O-M-M-E. Abbreviated mm, like millimeters, only it's a mummy. And it has to do with the thickness of the silk. So the thinner the silk, the lower the mummy. The thicker the silk, the higher the mummy. And this particular Habitai is very thin. The reason I like this particular silk is I don't personally feel like this makes very good scarves or ponchos. But this thickness of Habitai silk works really well for me when I do silk under glass. And I have been doing some silk sort of scarves or fabric that I've been dyeing, steam fixing, washing, and then I varnish them to the bottom of plates and or under tables, or with lights shining through and shadow boxes and stuff like that. This stuff works really well for that. And it also is thin enough so that you can do silk, quilted silk. So I'll show you some of those projects so you can see what I do with Habitai. This is a little, my husband actually put these up here for me. When we bought this house, this cabinetry was in here, but I put my silk plates up here, and I do these platters. And my husband actually put the lighting up here, so you can see the lighting coming through the platters. It almost looks like stained glass, and it's just beautiful. I use Habitai silk for this. This is another example of something I made using Habitai silk. It still needs a better edging, so I need some better binding tape on the edging. But this is a piece that I did called The Garden of Emotion. And it is Habitai silk. And then I quilted up the way normal quilters quilt things. They have a batting in the middle. and I use my freehand, free motion quilting head on my just regular sewing machine. As you can see, there's anxiety, there's sadness. It's called the Garden of Emotion. The habit tie works really well. It's thin enough so that I can quilt it on the machine, and it does a great job. This is a peacock that I did, and I did some decorative things with the feathers and stuff like that. I don't know anything about quilting. I'm just kind of learning as I go. These tapestry hangers, I feel, are beautiful, and they're very reasonably priced through Dharma Trading Company. If you Google the tapestry hangers, you'll come up with several different types of styles, and I think they work beautifully. I was making my own dowels at one point, and this just doesn't compare because it's much more professional looking. So that was habit tie silk, and I would say if you look at the descriptions that Dharma has, I'm not sure they have anything on habit tie. It's also known as China silk. I would consider that like the Pinto of silks. You know, it's just a standard model. But this next thing I'm going to show you is I usually use this kind of silk for my ponchos as well as scarves. And this is called crepe de chine. And you can see this is a little bit thicker. It really holds the dye beautifully. So you just get, just by virtue of the fact that you are using a thicker kind of silk, you are picking up more dye and your colors tend to be more vibrant. In addition, it drapes beautifully, so it works wonderfully as a poncho or a scarf or any kind of wearable silk that you want just to drape gracefully. It's just, there's nothing like this as for wearables. And then the last kind of silk that I use, and I don't have an example here because I guess I didn't order some from Dharma, is called charmeuse. And charmeuse silk is very luxurious. I would say maybe I'm half Korean, so I think about the silk handbox my mother had, and the charmeuse silk is actually what I use for my wall hangings, and it's just this very shimmery kind of luxurious thick silk, and it works beautifully for my wall hanging. So this wall hanging here I did is called Arbol de la Vida, and it's based on a digital print that I did a long time ago, but this time I kind of blew it up and adapted it to silk. So I used the latex Gouda, but I used the charmeuse silk, and at one point I was stretching this silk over a canvas, over fleece, over a canvas, and stapling it to the back, and so this is a frame that I made. Another example of a piece that I did on charmeuse silk, and it's called, it's a painting called Nary a Drop. I entered it in an exhibition we had with Oath Leaf, and it's just, you can see how shiny it is. This is what I have always thought of silk as being. There's just nothing like this for the wall hangings. And I did this, dyed the silk, but I also added some paint afterwards. And if you're doing wearables, you don't want to use silk paints. I may discuss the difference between silk paints and silk dyes in a little bit, but you don't want to use the paints for things like ponchos or scarves because it does affect the drape. It's kind of got a plastic feel, and the difference between paints and dyes is that paints stay on the surface of the silk, don't go through. Dyes will go all the way through the silk.